I don't know if most of you have heard the story that when Swami Kriyananda was young, when he would go to sleep at night, when he was just a young child, maybe 4 or 5, he would see this light, and he would gaze up at that light, and he would merge into that light, and then that's how he would go to sleep, merging into that light. It happened for a long time with him. And then he started telling his friends, or, when he got old enough to have friends, and he would tell people, some of his other friends, and they're like, "What? You're crazy. What's that?" And so he quit doing it. He thought he was weird or odd, and so he stopped looking for that light, and he quit merging into it. Maybe it stopped. The experience stopped. Then many years later, when he was in California, when he had connected with his guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, and got to the ashram in Los Angeles and had some teachings of meditation from Yogananda ji, Swamiji saw the light again, and he merged in the light again. And what he said and what he's told us is that when he merged into that light, let's see how many years later, it'd probably be, maybe 18, 19 years later, he merged into that light as a disciple in his guru's ashram. It was the same moment that he had merged into the light when he was a young child. He said no time had passed. It was the same moment. So we can kind of contemplate that and say, that sounds really great, but how does that work? I've heard that story and I thought, exactly how does that work? It sounds like it's truth, but how would that work for me? So we know that Yogananda ji, in his poem Samadhi, he says, "Past, present, future, no more for me, but ever flowing, ever present, all flowing, I, everywhere." That also sounds wonderful to all of us. And Swami Kriyananda wrote this book. It's called The Time Tunnel. He wrote it as a novel for young adults. And in it, 2 young boys travel through time to different civilizations, lots of truths, lots of learning in that novel for young children. But one of the sentences he says is, "Time does not go in a straight line from past to present to future, as people think. Rather, it proceeds in a circle, around a center, in the eternal now." And I have had a conversation with Nayaswami Asha about this statement. And this is how I've come to understand it. That, you have a circle of time. It's a circle. And in the middle of time, in the middle of the circle of time, is the eternal now. And most of us are on the rim of the circle, because most of us are identified with this incarnation, with this body, with this job, personality, situation in life. And this is what is real to us. This is our reality. And so we cling to the rim because this is who we think we are. But then, for example, I don't know, somewhere between maybe about 12 years ago, we were in Gurgaon, and Keshava got a reading from the Agastya Center there in Gurgaon. And they found his leaf. And the reason why we knew it was his leaf was because they said his mother's name was Muriel, his father's name was Charles, and they said my name also as his spouse, and that he had 3 siblings still living, on and on. We were in shock that this leaf that had been translated from ancient Tamil, which had been written, I don't know, thousands of years ago. So do you think those great sages lived on the rim? Or do you think they lived in the eternal now, that they could see the lives of so many souls in the future and write this on a leaf that would be translated and spoken to him at this time? So that's something to contemplate. And so we know it's possible to live in the eternal now. And then also we had a friend at Ananda Village. She was passing away. She's in the process of dying. She had cancer. And one of our Gurubhais, one of our friends, was with her. And she said, lately I've been seeing like 1,000 faces coming across my vision, coming across my consciousness. And I know that every one of those faces was me in a previous incarnation. So here she is in the process of leaving this incarnation, but it's hard to be overly attached to this incarnation when she can see thousands of faces of her incarnations before. So it helps us to be able to let go of that rim when we move into deeper and deeper spiritual truths. And so we think about climbing a mountain. As we climb a mountain, we're starting at the base and we can just see what's around us like this. But then we take we go up 500 feet or 1,000 feet and suddenly we can see more of the landscape. We go up higher the mountain, we can see more of the landscape. Suddenly our reality, our understanding has broadened, our awareness has heightened. And so here we are on a spiritual path. We're neither all matter, or we don't believe that we are just this flesh and blood. We wouldn't be here, I think, if that's all we believe. And yet it is really hard to make that leap to say, that this is not me. It's hard. We look in the mirror, we see it every day. We sort of believe this is who I am. I have this personality. These are my issues. This is my family. So, but we take step by step, like climbing up that mountain. As we proceed on the spiritual path, our awareness gets heightened, our reality expands. And suddenly, if you look at this rim, we're no longer clinging to the edge of the rim where we can't see anything. We can't really see our past. I mean, maybe we can see our childhood, but that's about as far back as we can see. And we can't see our future, so we're pretty stuck on that rim. But as we climb spiritually and slowly grow and meditate and perceive spiritual realities, we move off the rim towards the center. And just the same as climbing a mountain, as we move towards the center, suddenly our vision expands. Instead of just being able to see the spot on the rim, suddenly I can see a much bigger section of the rim. And also we learn more and more through these teachings is that we know that things we have done in the past, choices we have made, things we have thought, habits that we had, have brought us to where we are right now in the present. And we know that everything we're doing now in the present, the choices that we're making, our consciousness, what we're thinking, is going to influence where we are in the future. So suddenly it's not separate. It's like we can understand that the consciousness of the past is unbroken through the present and in the future also. And in these teachings, we realize more and more we are not, of course, just matter and just not these material bodies, but we have chakras. We have an energy pattern that comes with us. We came in with an energy pattern. Where did that come from? It came from before. It came from before that. So many, many lives, we've created this energy pattern which brought to us our karma in this lifetime, our situation in this lifetime. So we can no longer separate and say, why did this happen to me? Because we know that we attracted it. Our energy pattern has attracted this situation to us for our growth. And then we know also through these teachings that we have the power, that we have the understanding and the knowledge of how to change our energy pattern. How can we change what is flowing through our chakra? How we can focus on the higher chakras and not on the lower chakras? How we can cleanse through Kriya Yoga, how to clear the karma that's sitting in these chakras. And so we have the power to change the energy pattern for the future. And so suddenly you see that this consciousness and this energy that's flowing through, where is there a dividing line? Where is there a dividing line? We may not be able to remember our past lives, but our consciousness came through when we were born. From when we were young until now, has there been any break in your consciousness? We may have learned a lot, but we still have that same consciousness we had as a child, as a baby. And when we leave this body, we'll take that consciousness with us. We'll take our energy pattern and we'll take that consciousness with us. That energy that's flowing through us will go with us. So there's no break, there's no division. Master Yogananda ji has said that it's like going into different rooms. We're in a physical body. We leave this physical body, suddenly we're in the room of the astral body, but our consciousness and energy has come with us. We end up in a different room with our consciousness and energy flowing through us. And where is the separation there? So if we look at the circle, if we move more and more towards the center of that circle, we can look anywhere and see that from the center, we can see the rim. Think of Swamiji. He was in the center. When he was a child, he was in the center, merging into light. And when he was a monk with his guru, he was merging into that light also. He was in that center. And from that center, there was nowhere to go. There was no time that's passed. He's in the center and equidistant to any life. He's in the middle. So that's where we want to go, into the middle. That's how we find the eternal now. And all the teachings that our gurus give us, gaze up at the spiritual eye. The pictures of Babaji, he's gazing up. You go to museums in Europe, you see saints gazing up. They're in ecstasy, gazing up. They didn't even know the classic yoga teachings. They're in ecstasy, their eyes are up. Krishna says, keep your gaze up throughout your meditation. Christ is saying, gaze up. This is the seat of superconsciousness. This is how you will merge with God and commune with God. And so back to, and the other thing Yogananda said was memorize my poem Samadhi, because it helps you to remember who you really are. You are not this material being. Past, future, present, no more for me. Only ever present, all flowing I everywhere. Also in that poem, he says, eternity and I, one united ray. That's for us. Namaste.
The eternal now. Well, now is now, and eternal is forever. But how can forever be now? They seem like opposites. And Yogananda ji was in the interesting position of being a Swami, teaching in Los Angeles during the golden age of Hollywood. A number of his students were actors, and he would often make the analogy with movies and spiritual teaching. And one of them, he describes that a certain movie may be this epic movie that goes on for many, many years, the story in the movie, maybe centuries. And yet, in the movie theater, almost no time at all has passed. And we're always in the present. And so also our outer life goes on for many years, like that movie. But the soul witnesses these passing years, but the soul is untouched. It's always in that now, that present, and that now that contains all of eternity. In the Gita, Sri Krishna tells us the soul is never touched. It is immutable, all-pervading, calm, unshakable. The soul's existence is eternal. That passing of time is an illusion that's relative just to this outer world. And what happens there isn't all that important to our immortal self. And that eternal truth encompasses everything, but it isn't limited by time and space. And in this way, it's possible for some people to see the future, as Daya was describing the writings associated with the sages Agastya and Brigu. And one of those pages for Swamiji, it mentioned there that he had a sister who died in his mother's womb. And Swamiji had no knowledge of this. It was not something that they could have read his mind. But then later he talked to his mother and she confirmed, oh yes, I had a miscarriage once. When Daya and I were in America, we spent a lot of time with her mother. And her mother has the kind of memory loss that is very common with her age. And she would ask us, well, now, what time today is my friend coming over? And we would tell her 5 o'clock. And then 5 minutes later, she would ask, now, is my friend coming tomorrow? No, it's today at 5 o'clock. And at the same time, she would tell me how she was remembering, things that happened to her 80 years ago in her childhood. And she remembers them much more clearly than she ever had before. Swamiji, at the end of his life, he would remember ever more clearly what his guru told him 60 years before that. And time does not exist, as Daya also explained very well. And Yoganandaji wrote, people require time to find God only because they are bound to time consciousness. God is with us always, never more so and never less so. We need to constantly tell ourselves, I have him now, eternally. He is mine. There was a direct disciple of Yoganandaji. Her name was Kamala, and she lived at Ananda village for a short time near the end of her life. And she had severe dementia, and she just could not remember the daily things that she needed to take care of herself. And yet she wasn't upset. She wasn't angry at this situation, at this lack of control. Rather, she lived in another world. She was content. She was living with her guru mentally, and she was always cheerful, always loving. Even though she didn't know who was coming in the door, she treated that person with the same love, because she was living in the now, in the present time. And Swamiji said about her, he said, it's only her mind. It's only her mind that is affected by the memory loss. She remains in the spirit, and she's untouched, because the mind is something outside of her soul. And we tend to think that the mind is everything. And perhaps more immediate than asking the question, when will I find God, might be, when will I be truly happy? And we might think, well, when I have more money, when I'm married and settled, when I have a really good job. And Master told us, if you want to be happy, nothing and no one can make you unhappy. And he means now, in this moment, if you have that desire. And we may think, well, I'll be happy if I meditate more, or if I meditate better. But even in a lousy meditation, we can feel the presence of God, even in the last minute of that meditation. It's all it takes. Or we may think, well, I'll be happy when I have more time to dedicate to the path. When my children are grown, or when I get over this crisis, when my health is better. And now is the time. This is the message of this reading that Swamiji has given us. You'll never have more time, you'll never have a better situation than you do right now to make that growth. Swamiji I remember how he would do things in the moment as much as possible. He wrote a book called Do It Now. And I recall in meetings, maybe we would be discussing, some future project in the work or some aspect of it. And we would suggest to Swamiji, well, maybe this particular person would be good at this needed job. And he wouldn't say, okay, send me a report on that, will you? Or I'll think about that tomorrow when I'm at my desk. He would, in the middle of the meeting, pick up the phone, call that person, and find out in that moment, resolve that question. And this is his teaching also to us. And he and Master would, and you've probably heard the story, but tell the very touching story of Sri Chaitanya. And when his disciples asked him, when will I find God? And he would say to one, well, in this lifetime, or in 3 lifetimes. But then his closest disciple came to him and asked him. And he said, you would find God after 1,000,000 lifetimes. Then later, this man was outside dancing with joy. And the other disciples came up and said, didn't you hear what the Master said? And he said, yes. He said, I would find God. What does it matter how long it would take? And with the right consciousness, we can have that now. We can be happy now, and we can realize God fully in this moment. Thank you.